I mentioned this release at the end of my last video, and I did so because I'd had a bit of a sneak peek, and following that I just knew that people were going to tell me excessive image noise reduction had been applied. But is this really the case? American Graffiti has an image aspect ratio of 235 to 1, 240 to 1 approximately, and it was shot in a process called TechniScope, which is a 35mm process. Now this is a 35mm print, if you can see that, and hopefully you can make out, although this is leader, that the black frames there are 4 sprockets high. TechniScope is 2 sprockets high, and that's why I call it poor man's 35mm, because it clearly halves the cost of the negative stock to shoot the film, which was important with this film because it was low budget, $750,000 US, and it took at the worldwide box office $115 million. So a massive return on investment, and apparently one of the biggest returns in movie making history. What contributes to that success? Well, American Graffiti has always had a reputation for having extremely rich colours, almost neon colours. And this 4K disc, I'm happy to report, has got those neon colours. It also comes with a 5.1 soundtrack. I think it's DTS HD 5.1. Also has a 2.0 soundtrack. And of the two, I played them both through extensively. I found the 5.1 was the more satisfying, particularly the end with the car crash. And that car crash, well, with my subwoofer, it almost knocked us out of our seats. So that's probably not normal, really, for a film made in 1973. But somehow it adds something to it in here. The 2.0 soundtrack didn't have that same thump to it, didn't have the same depth, although it is still very good. It was important for me with this film to have a look at the Blu-ray, because after the comments following my mention of this film or this release in the review of Mission Impossible 7, I got the impression people were basing their experience of American Graffiti on the previous home movie releases, and in this case it's got to be the Blu-ray, might be the DVD, but nevertheless, one comment said George Lucas has ruined American Graffiti, and I can see where he's coming from, because his previous 4K, or one of his previous 4Ks, and I've done THX of course, Star Wars. Now this is one of the rehash versions of Star Wars. I don't know where we're up to in the rehashes of Star Wars now, but very difficult for me to watch. In 1997 it was a novelty, and I do think perhaps the Death Star Battle at the end might even be better on the special edition than it is on the original. But for me, it's the film I saw as a youngster, and that's what I want to see. I do remember how it looked in the cinema. I saw our local cinema's general release print twice, and it was a bit knackered, I think, grainy print, and that's how I remember it. And I have it on Super 8, and it's got that same sort of look, probably worse than that actually, because it's not the best Super 8 print ever struck. But that's how I like to see Star Wars, and this isn't it. So I can understand that if people really do love American Graffiti and they've seen this pristine looking image quality, then I can understand where they're coming from. But my opinion of it is that there's only a few shots here and there, maybe half a dozen or a dozen at most, where I think it was too dark on the night, and the low level light that was being used to shoot this initially did mean that the cinematographers, the cameramen, had a very shallow depth of field in order to attain focus, and they did say that occasionally it was down to as low as 6 inches, so if the character moved he'd be out of focus. And I think you will spot that occasionally in this, but after a while they went to George Lucas and convinced him to allow them to up the light levels, and that made things a lot easier. But it is all set on one night. That is one of its strengths. Like After Hours that I reviewed, 4 or 5 weeks ago, it's got that sort of confined, all in one space sort of film. This one's perhaps a bit more vast as they're driving around a fairly sizable town, but it's got that same sort of feeling. And the young actors and actresses in this, they're all wonderful. They all come together so well, and you feel involved with them. So you're involved with the setting, involved with the characters, and the vibrant colours sort of suck you in. And then there's the wonderful soundtrack, which there's no score in this. It's all just the hits up to around the 1962 sort of era. And that works extremely well, combined with the disc jockey Wolfman Jack and that unique voice. All creates a certain sort of magic that I don't think has ever been matched in any film of its kind like this since. So given what people were telling me, it was important that I had a look at the Blu-ray disc. There's the Blu-ray. It's 4K trying to come out. But this appears to be the previous release Blu-ray, because once I got it working, there is an incompatibility issue between this Blu-ray and my Panasonic player, whereby I had to turn off all connections to the internet router, otherwise it would just go round and round in a loop. But once I sorted that out and can put it on, having watched the 4K and those vibrant colours and the lack of film grain, really, a sort of pristine looking image, then going to the Blu-ray and seeing this rather muted, grain-ridden image where the reds are sort of pink and the colours are just generally wrong. I thought, how on earth can anyone watch this film like this? But if that's how you're used to seeing American Graffiti, then I can understand why you really would not want to see it looking so brand new, really, as on the 4K disc. Now, the first thing I did once I put the 4K of American Graffiti on in here for a sneak peek, this was my second sneak peek. The first was on my television, which is only 40 inches diagonal, so it's about 3 feet wide. I thought immediately on there, must have excessive image noise reduction to look this good from a TechniScope, but it looked good, and so I thought I'll check this before putting Mission Impossible 7 on, which is what we did a few nights ago. I put American Graffiti on and it looked good to me, so I went and pressed my face up to the 10-foot wide screen, or the 10-foot wide painted white wall, I should say, and I could still see the film grain. Yes, it was fine, and possibly finer than the negative really is, but it was still there. And then I went and looked closely at the characters' faces. The detail was still there. So I thought, well, okay, there might be excessive image noise reduction, but as far as I can see, it looks good, and that is good enough for me. But I think if I had a film print that looked like this Blu-ray of American Graffiti, I don't think I'd ever run it. And thinking about TechniScope, 35mm TechniScope, a couple of weekends ago at the Phoenix Cinema and Arts Centre in Leicester, I ran the Scope print, the Scope Super 8 print, an extract of it of speed on their huge screen. I think it's about 30 feet wide, their screen, but I was overfilling it, so probably wider than that. And that Super 8 print still looked pretty good. So that image is 6mm across, and so TechniScope is a darn sight more quality than that. So I think master prints might have looked this good. Maybe not quite this good, being as it's TechniScope, but I can't be sure. But they certainly would not look like the Blu-ray. I can't imagine anything would have looked like the Blu-ray, but having said that, that Blu-ray has presumably been a transfer of a general release print, which presumably has had faded colours, and they've had to try and bring them back, and perhaps not done too well on that score. So the soundtrack too on the Blu-ray, 2.0 soundtrack, and at times we couldn't actually hear what people were saying. We didn't have that problem with the 5.1 soundtrack, particularly on the 4K, but I don't think we even noticed it on the 2.0. So there's a lot to be said in favour of the 4K, but if you're used to seeing American Graffiti looking sort of grimy, grindhouse, I suppose is the word, then maybe the 4K is not going to be for you. But if you're like me, you saw the film as a youngster and you very much enjoyed it and want to see it again with those vibrant colours, then the 4K might just be for you. Now, I don't have colours in here set up as vibrant or as rich as most people seem to, particularly on OLED televisions. I like vivid colours at times, but mainly when it's been a Technicolor film, like the 10 Commandments, which is a great 4K disc because of its VistaVision and Technicolor origins. I love to see that rich colour in the 10 Commandments, because that's how the best master Technicolor prints would have looked, perhaps, back in the day. But on something like this, I don't want to see them so over-enhanced that it makes the image look fake. So if anyone's looking at this and thinks the colours just don't look right, then maybe turn your colour down. And I think I can guarantee that if you think the colours are too rich and it's got too much image noise reduction, if you were sat in here with me watching it on the 10-foot wide screen here, the way it looks in here, you will come away thinking this was a very good, if not a great, 4K disc. Now, I can't be sure everyone will agree with that. I'm sure there won't be people who agree with it. But I feel after last night, actually I feel on a high, because I've seen American Graffiti just like I would have liked to have seen it had I been around to see it at the cinema in 1973, or maybe at a Premiere House cinema showing a master print of American Graffiti. I feel like I've just seen a great film, not for the first time, but almost for the first time, and it's down to this 4K disc. So I know a lot of reviews out there, although I haven't watched any of them. I try to never watch anyone else's review if I'm intending to review a disc myself, because it can influence you. And if the first person goes out and says, this is the worst thing that's ever been done to a 4K, then it is possible to get influenced, but I don't seem to suffer with that. So I think this is a very good 4K. It's not perfect. There are some scenes, as I say, where I thought, oh, that looks a bit fake. So it's £25. It's £25 for a steelbook, and it's got an image this good and sound this good, and it's a great film. Well, I think I can forgive a few scenes where I think, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. Or they've brightened that up too much. Well, he looks like he's standing there in 3D because they've used DaVinci Resolve to bring him out, but the background is still as dark as it should be. But anyway, the Blu-ray I thought was awful after watching the 4K. That's a bit unfair, because on its own I might have been quite happy with it. I'm sure there are going to be people that tell me I'm completely wrong on this, and that's fine. We're all entitled to an opinion. I'm happy with it. You may not be, but come in here and watch it with me. I think you probably would be. So all our systems are different. I just happen to have mine set up to replicate film as closely as possible, and that's why I think I've got the best out of this, and maybe others haven't quite got such a good experience out of it as I did. One other thing to say before I go, the extras are all on the 4K disc, which is nice. No need to put the Blu-ray disc in and get disappointed with the image quality of that. But anyway, I watched them all, very interesting, and strangely similar to the story about American Graffiti and this great George Lucas book. But anyway, I hope that wraps things up, really. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like, and perhaps consider subscribing, so I'll be encouraged to carry on creating similar controversial content like this in future. Until the next video, bye bye for now.